Let's go. The Torah reading today is Parshas Beshalach. Beshalach is on page 265. It is Exodus 13, chapter 13, verse 17. And while last week's Torah reading described the exodus of the Jewish people as they leave Egypt, this week describes the triumph of the Jewish people. It describes the travel. It describes God's protection. It describes the splitting of the sea. And then most markedly is the song after the splitting of the sea. And the song after the splitting of the sea. And then the magical story of the manna, the mun, sweetening of the water. I mean, this is such a miracle parsha. It's unbelievable. The gift of Shabbos is in this week's Torah reading. The gift of water in the desert and then finally the battle with Amalek. So if I would characterize this entire reading, I would say it is the triumph, the post-Exodus triumph of the Jewish people. So it's such a rich portion. And I find myself a bit overwhelmed. So I thought first we'd start in the middle. And that is with the story of the manna. Page 274. And 275, chapter 16. And they took their journey from Elim. This is after the miraculous splitting of the sea. The children of Israel are completely free of the grip of the Egyptians, and they are now ready to manifest their own destiny. And they travel from Elim. They all come to the desert of Sin. That's that Sin is Sinai, which is between Mount Elim and Sinai. On the 15th day of the second month after their having left Egypt. And the people complained against Moses and Aaron in the desert, and they said, "Would that we die by the hand of God in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots, eating bread to our satisfaction, that you have taken us out into this desert to die of hunger. We would rather die of old age as slaves than die of hunger in the desert." God said to Moses, and this is where the action begins, God said to Moses, "Behold, I will make rain for you, bread from the heaven. The people will go out and collect each day, in order that I will test them if they will follow my teaching or not. On the sixth day, they will prepare that which they bring in, and it will be double of that which they collect every other day." And the reason it's double, as we'll see later, is because you're not supposed to collect it on the Sabbath. And Moses comes and says, Moses and Aaron tell the sons of Israel, "At evening you shall know that God has taken you out of Egypt, and in the morning you will see the glory of God as he hears your complaints. And what are we that we should complain against us? That you should complain against us?" And Moses said, "When God will give you in the evening meat to eat, and in the morning bread to satisfy yourself, as God has heard your complaints that you complain against him, it is not we. Your complaints are not against us, but they are against God." Now, I want to say this this passage, this chapter, is a very ancient custom to read this chapter, Exodus 16, every day. And probably starting from verse 4. Because that's where the paragraph begins. Yeah, you see it? The paragraph begins. So it's a very ancient custom to read it every day after the daily prayers. And there's an old teaching that says that one who reads this passage every day will never lack for sustenance. And
which number on page 275?
I'm going to say starting from verse 4. And probably until the end of chapter 16.
Which is the end of 16.
Yeah?
Which is the end of 16.
Which is the end of 16.
The end of the whole thing, I think.
Yeah.
16 goes on to the middle of page 278.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's where it would go until verse 36, page 278. Yeah. So the Talmud said this teaching says that that one who reads this passage every day will never lack for sustenance. And so what I think that means is that this is a teaching about the way in which we should think about our sustenance, about our livelihood. And there's a lot of secrets in this that reading it every day will help to reveal. So to be honest, I don't read it every day. It's not in my tradition. But I think the fact that there is this teaching, when we do read it, should direct us as to what we might be reading into.
Well, whose teaching is it? Just
It's brought down in the Shulchan Aruch.
on the Shulchan.
Yeah. It comes from a very old tradition. It goes back to Talmudic times. But so the first thing that I notice is the idea that the collecting of the manna is considered a test. What is a test?
Which they'll take.
And what is the association with reading the passage of the manna and being associated with our daily livelihood? If anything, it is the exact opposite of a text that you would want to read in order to think about daily livelihood, because the manna is everything that our own struggle for financial security is not, at least at first.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
we are struggling to bring forth bread from the earth, and this is bread from the heaven, right? We say the blessing that we say on our bread: "Blessed are you, Lord our God, who brings forth bread from the earth." Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. And here we're saying lechem min hashamayim, bread from the heaven. So we're tilling the soil in ancient times. Well, not only in ancient times, but the process of producing bread involves working the ground, investing, and then processing, and baking, and then slicing, and then spreading on your peanut butter or whatever it is your pleasure, or poison. And this is exactly the opposite. This is simply, it shows up at your doorstep every day. And yet, when we would think about this struggle, the test of God testing us in view of our sustenance, we would think that the test is much greater in our lechem min haaretz, in our bread from the earth, than it is in the bread from the heaven. And yet the Torah specifically, the Torah doesn't say, when the Torah describes working, 6 days shall you work, and on the seventh day you shall rest. It doesn't say there, in order that I'm testing you. It's here in the collecting of manna that fell literally from the sky that it's described as being a test. So that's one sort of thing that jumps out at me. Another thing that jumps out at me is that it's considered something you shouldn't do on the Sabbath. And so while on the one hand, it isn't the same as the Sheshes Yomim Tavod, 6 days shall you work, on the other hand, it is. And so what I think we're being told here is that we should really superimpose the teachings of the manna onto, right, that hint about not collecting man on the Sabbath, to me says that actually every day that I go to work, I am not working, I'm collecting manna. And what I see as bread from the earth is no different from bread from the sky. And just as, and it goes both ways, the collecting of bread from the sky is a test in a way that I wouldn't think it is. I would think that the bread from the earth is the greater test. And in the same way, collecting bread from the from the sky is work in a way that I wouldn't think it is. Collecting bread from the earth is a heavenly gift in a way that I wouldn't think it is.
We think it's coming from
We
us.
think that we're doing the work
Right. So it's
when
from
really
us.
it's bread from the heaven.
So everything is
And so what we're being reminded to do as we read the passage of the manna each day before going to work is that we should meditate on the idea that divine sustenance, the fact that it's a test doesn't mean that it's not divine sustenance. And the fact that I have to do work doesn't mean it's not divine sustenance. Because even divine sustenance is considered something which I can't do on the Sabbath, and it's considered a test. So those things are very much associated one with the other.
So the manna fell on the Sabbath also?
The manna did not fall on the Sabbath.
Oh, so there was no issue about collecting it.
Right. So why shouldn't it?
Anyway.
Right. But so later on we'll see.
How is this a test?
So that's a good question. What is the test? So perhaps the test is
To go
But
out
we
and
only
look
took-
for it.
We only took one on Friday.
to
expecting
take
go
the
next
2 on
Friday.
Friday, right?
But
Perhaps
we
the
didn't.
test is that there's specific mitzvahs pertaining to the manna, right? How much to take, not to go out on collect. Here,
That would be an issue daily
to take
what you need for that.
to take what you need for that day. And to be honest, I think there's more to it that I'm not necessarily seeing, but I think that we have to sort of dig into this.
Well, to know what our portion in life is and everything.
Yeah.
Across the board, not just the bread, but
So there's a teaching in the Talmud in the end of Tractate Kiddushin that caught my eye and has stuck with me ever since I read it. It says there is no profession that does not have its wealthy and poor. Right? No profession on earth. So have you ever met a poor lawyer? Plenty. Have you ever met a wealthy blue-collar worker? Plenty. I mean, we had a guy here in the shul who worked in a factory. Simplest guy. You would never know him. He wore pants with suspenders. The only when he passed away, we had a call from the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., from Hadassah Hospital, from the Jewish Federation, saying we would like to have a memorial for Mr. Pfefferman.
we must have given a lot of money.
I mean, the man had he was a factory worker.
We didn't say it.
The only tell was he always had a cigar in his shirt pocket. And I heard later that those were Cubans. So that was the tell. But otherwise you would never know. He worked in a factory. He didn't spend much. He invested. The investments produced. He became very wealthy. And he gave generously. Millions. He gave millions. And this guy was sitting in the back row of the shul. You would never know. Right? And then we have another guy who went to Wharton Business School. And he's homeless. So there is no profession that doesn't have its wealthy and poor. So the reminder is that the bread comes from heaven. Now, am I saying, so what often happens, and there was a time in history where people thought this way, is that they say, well, I'm wealthy, it means that I'm entitled to my wealth because it was given to me by fate, right? Which is another word by saying I was ordained by God to be wealthy. Now, there's actually Jewish precedent even for thinking like this. The Talmud teaches that Rabbi Yehuda the Prince, the compiler of the Mishnah, one of the greatest Jewish leaders in history, used to extend special honor to people who were wealthy. Rabbi Yehuda Mechabed Ashirim. Why?
Bless them.
They must
God-
be favored.
If they're favored by God, right? Now, that doesn't mean
God, he doesn't favor.
that that the blessing means that you're meant to keep it. What is the blessing of wealth? The blessing of wealth is of influence, power and influence. And so when we're blessed with power and influence, our test is not how we use it on ourselves, it's how we use it to benefit ourselves, it's how we use it to benefit others. And here I want to turn to another portion in the Torah. We have two readings that describe the relationship with water. Let's go to the other. I think the significant one is chapter 17, the chapter immediately following the one of the manna. Okay. The congregation of Israel journeyed from the wilderness of Sin by their stages according to the encampment of the Lord. Encamped at Rephidim, there was no water for the people to drink. Yeah, page 278, chapter 17. There was no water for the people to drink. So the people argued with Moses, and they said, give us water that we may drink. Moses said, why are you arguing with me? Why are you arguing? Why are you testing God? People thirsted for water, and they murmured against Moses, and they said, why have you brought us again? Same nonsense. Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our cattle with thirst? And Moses cried unto the Lord and said, what shall I do to this people? They're ready to stone me. And God said to Moses, pass on before the people. Take with you the elders of Israel and your staff that you smote the river, right? The one that Moses used to change the Nile River into blood. That's the first moment when Moses used the staff. And take it in your hand and go. And behold, I stand before you there on the rock in Chorev, and you shall smite the rock, and there shall come water out of it, so that the people may drink. Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. Okay? Now, later on, in Deuteronomy, the Torah recalls this story and tells us what happened after. Where is it?
Even a person that is blessed with God, how do they know how to distribute it?
So I want to make sure I don't lose my.
Yeah, I wanted to tell you.
I'm trying to find this here.
Address it at the
All
end.
right. Yeah, you hold. Maybe we'll have.
Some
Uh,
calls and people at the door. You know, what to do. You know, people in the apartment house.
So the story goes that that there was once a I told the story on Wednesday last week. There was once a rabbi and a priest who lived across the street from one another, and the priest says to the rabbi, I'm always getting broken into. My house is getting broken into. What shall I do? And the rabbi says, "Oh, I've never gotten broken into." The priest says, "Why not?" He says, "Well, I have a mezuzah on my door, and that's God's protection." And sure enough, the priest says, "Will you get me one?" And the rabbi says, "Sure, gladly, gladly." And so he gives the priest a mezuzah. The priest puts the mezuzah on the door, and thank you very much. A few days later, the priest knocks on the rabbi's door again. He says, "Rabbi, would you please take the mezuzah back?" The rabbi says, "Did it not work?" He says, "Oh boy, it worked. I haven't been broken into since, but ever since I put that thing on my door, there has not gone a day by where people aren't knocking on the door. Now they knock. What do you want? Can I please have some tzedakah? Can I please have some tzedakah?" Okay. Here we go. Page 661. Numbers 21, verse 16.
61. Verse 16.
Okay. And from there to Be'er, this is describing the travels of the Jewish people through the desert. And from there to the well. It is the well that God said to Moses, "Gather the people and I will give them water." And then Israel sang this song regarding the well. And right, "Spring up, O well, sing ye unto it, the well which the princes digged, which the nobles of the people delved with the scepter and with their staves." All right, that's a short poem that the Jewish people composed in celebration of receiving the water from the well. But when it comes to the manna, we don't find that the children of Israel celebrated in song. It's no less wondrous, no less necessary. It occurs to me that it's remarkable that the manna is not rejoiced over as much as the water is. And I think the reason is because our reaction to receiving bread from the heaven, which is our sustenance, should not be to rejoice at the wonderment of how wealthy we are and how blessed we are. It is to feel a responsibility and a calling to put that influence to work. And this is this is, by the way, not being said to people who don't have This is being said to people who do have. If what we do have is a calling. Whereas with water, it's not. Water is not something which one can take too much of. It's just not the way I think of water. Water is tasteless. It's simply purely life-sustaining. Whereas the bread from the heaven has more of a connotation of wealth, gluttony. Now, again, of course, our tradition says that that's not the nature of the bread from the heaven, but the notion of bread is one that is more given to a relationship of selfishness than water. A person is expected, of course, to share their water, but we're supposed to take water for ourselves first. So the lessons that we learn about our parnasa, about our sustenance, are that whatever I have is ordained by God, and whatever I have each day is ordained by God, and what is given to me is power and influence, and my calling is how to put that to work, how to share that, how to use that for the betterment of society. And this is something that is a test on each individual from God. The test is to know how much I need for myself and not to take more than I need. The test is not to collect, not to work when I shouldn't be working. Meaning, if a person, this idea that I'm going to have double on Friday and not be able to work and not pick it up on Saturday, says that when I go to work, I am not making money. I am collecting the money which has fallen from the heaven. And therefore, just as it's futile for me to go out collecting the bread that has fallen from the heaven on a day when it doesn't fall, so too it's futile to try and make money on a day when God said we shouldn't go to work. And maybe that's the test, to remember that that's a manifestation. It's a way in which we can test ourselves to see whether we think we're making money or whether we think we're collecting the money.
This society is a lot of workaholics.
Yeah.
And it goes against all that.
Right.
More.
More. In verse 14 of chapter 7, 14 and 16, one of them seems to say that the Lord is going to utterly blot out the remembrance of Amalek. That's pretty utter.
Mm-hmm.
Not only is going to destroy them, but their memory will disappear.
Mm-hmm.
And then the 16 says that the Lord will war with Melech from generation to generation. Sounds like they won't be blotted out.
Mm.
They'll continue to be a thorn on our side
Mm-hmm.
forever.
Yeah.
So which is it, or am I misreading those?
Okay, so we're changing gears, yeah?
Yeah.
So the battle of Amalek, the first nation to attack the Jewish people, from the first nation to attack the Jewish people
As a nation.
since they left Egypt. An unprovoked attack. Meaning we weren't passing through their land. It was a preemptive strike that they did on the Jewish people leaving Egypt, after having been shown that we're blessed by God. And it's interesting that it comes right after the manna and the water comes the battle of Amalek. What are we to blot out? Okay, so we can think of ourselves as blotting out the actual nation that challenged us. But I think that the problem is not the people, it's the remembrance of the people. So we walk in, the Torah here might be describing a phenomenon that happens in our lives. We feel blessed. We feel a sense of wonderment and a sense of thanks for amazing things which have happened in our lives. And in that moment, we're good with God. And then along comes something which completely doesn't make sense, that completely counters everything. It's the what about that horrible thing that happened? Where is God then? So in reality, we can either focus on the manna, on the miraculous bread from the heaven, which falls every day, and the water of the well, which is there constantly. And that could be our guiding experience. Or we can focus on the Amalekites that attack us despite our exalted status, and choose that as proof that we're really not that exalted at all. And so what the Torah is telling us, I think, is that you have to recognize the remembrance of Amalek is the problem. That it shouldn't be their existence shouldn't be something that guides you. That shouldn't be something that's a compass for you. I also think that, especially in today's day and age, with rising fears about anti-Semitism, I think it also might be saying, don't live in opposition to anti-Semitism. Wipe out their name. Because it's very easy to make the remembrance never again the first commandment of Judaism. And that shouldn't be the first commandment of Judaism. We should avoid mentioning the anti-Semites, even as we have to continue to do battle with them in every generation. So there's that. There's another reading that's even stronger. That's page 856. That's Deuteronomy 25:17. It's the end of Parshas Kiseitze, page 856. Remember, so here are the contradictions here. Remember what Amalek did to you on the road when you left Egypt, how he met you on the way and smote the hindmost part of you, all those who were enfeebled, while you were faint and tired, and he had no fear of God. And it shall be, when God has given you rest from all your enemies in the land which God has given you for an inheritance to possess it, that you shall blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under the heaven, you shall not forget. So he says, remember them, blot out their remembrance, don't forget. Right? In the previous in our reading, in Exodus 17, God says, I shall wipe out the remembrance of Amalek from under the heaven. And here he says, you shall wipe out the remembrance of Amalek from under the heaven.
He tells us to remember Amalek.
He tells us to remember them as we wipe out their memory.
Okay.
So I think that's the point, is which we have to be vigilant. We have to remember that we're constantly fighting this battle. But it can't be our raison d'etre, in which sadly in the modern American Jewish community, being anti-Semitism is sort of the thing that it's interesting to me that politicians, the first thing they want to say when they want to say how much they support the Jewish community is, we look at the measures we've taken to combat hate, and we support Israel.
Vote for me.
Right? Vote, and of course vote for me. That's not what I care about. I want to know how you're helping our parochial schools. That's what I care about. I want to know what are you doing to promote school choice so that our children can have a Jewish education and not be disadvantaged by the fact that they want to have an education in a religious environment. So of course I understand the challenges in the separation of church and state. I understand those challenges, but the odds are not insurmountable. Many states, the state of Ohio has school vouchers, and much of the yeshiva tuition is paid for. Certainly, the secular components of the yeshiva tuition is not a church and state matter.
Well, church and
It's a state service being provided within a church. That's it's not
church and state supposed to be separate. How could they impose a curriculum on the yeshivas?
So if you get tax dollars, then there's also an education requirement, meaning you can teach any religious thing that you want, but there is a requirement that the district provide education to all youth. There are truancy laws, right? You can't stay. Child is not allowed to stay out of school, right?
There's also seems to be requirements about secular subjects so that they can then earn a living when they become adults, rather than become wards of the state.
Right. So I think that I would much rather hear from a politician about what they're doing to support Jewish life than to hear what they're doing to combat anti-Semitism. And this is the challenge of erasing the memory of Amalek while continuing to do battle with them. Right? So, of course, we want to do battle with anti-Semitism, but that's not our identity.
Like we enhance Jewish life.
Right. But on a personal level, I think it's remarkable that it comes after the manna and the well, which is to say, this is the thing that turns around often and causes us to doubt. It contradicts the miracle in our life of God's gift. And so we have to choose. We have to choose if we want to be happy. We have to choose if we want to be singing the song of the well, or whether we want to be anxious about anti-Semitism. It's a choice.
So one is spiritual, more spiritual, and anti-Semitism, more physical.
Well, I'm not talking about doing the battle.
No, but I'm saying some people don't want to deal with the connection, gratitude.
Well, they're both feelings. That's what I'm talking simply about the feeling. Which should be in our mind? Gratitude for what we have, or anxiety about what might come?
Sure.
Right? That's a choice.
And everything.
Right. So what did we say today? Our sustenance is bread from the heaven. If we have more, it's because God gave it to us, not in order to sing about, but in order to do something about, to share with others. We're not sharing with others less fortunate than us. That's, I think, not the right way to look at it. We are sharing with those who were ordained to receive it from their fellow men. Some of us were ordained to receive it from the heaven, and some of us were ordained to receive it from our fellow men. So we're all receiving.
And if you feel like singing, that's okay too, I suppose, especially if you're in the Chabad, which likes joy.
So
I
yes,
suppose the song won't contradict.
Joy is holy.
the song is after eating, by the way, not after making money. So that's what I'm saying. I think that in a way, there's a distraction. Meaning it's a moment wasted when we should be thinking about where to put this money, and that's not the time for it. After we've eaten our fill, then we're grateful, of course. So we have to do plenty of songs. So I'm very excited about this Shabbos. Super excited.
This Shabbos?
Yes,
Why?
this Shabbos. It's the Shabbos of song, because I didn't talk at all about the song at the sea, which is a major feature of this week's Torah reading, Exodus 15. And therefore, it is a Shabbos of song, and we're going to have a choral group joining us for Shabbos. And I'm completely pumped about it. I'm really excited. I hope it's going to be good. And there's nothing like Shabbos with a choir. It's just nothing like it. So
Berkhoff, I went once. They had it amazing. In Israel of Berkhoff, they had a Rosh Chodesh. These men singing. It was like tremendous shul, old shul.
yeah. So we're gonna have singing during the davening. We're gonna have singing during the meal. We have a Friday night dinner, and a musical Havdalah service. Can you tell that I'm excited?
Yes.
I'm excited. So if you want to join us, you can sign up at machanechadash.org/Shabbat.
Sign up. Go to shul.
Sign up for the dinner.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, but everything else, of course, you don't have to sign up. Just show up.
Right.
Take the back.